All right. So last time we started talking about requirements gathering and how we do it and what's important. And we started and spent a lot of time on vision. Oh, good. We got a couple of people that are presenting. Excellent. So we talked about a little bit about the different tools that we have available for setting vision. And then we started talking about a lot of the challenges for vision setting. And so we talked about, how customers often don't know where they're going, but they're ready to start. Everybody's wants to be out of the box until they come up with something that they want to do that's not out of the box. Um, and we talked about, governance of changes coming in, wait some period of time to see if they actually really need it. Make sure you're documenting requests. Yeah, and then watch customization versus configuration webinar that I did with Chuck Tomasi a while ago. And these are just some other things that people talked about using, different tools like Lean Canvas and using the ServiceNow demand module. So I captured all of this in the PowerPoint for you all to live on, and so you can reuse that. But today I wanted to get into starting to talk about some of the tools that you can use as you start with requirements gathering. And I'm going to pop over here and show you one of our welcome guides if you're not familiar with those. And this is kind of what the guide covers here. I'm just curious if all of you are familiar with those, if you use those. And while you respond to me on that, I'm going to go ahead and start unmuting folks so that we can have a conversation. And if anybody wants to chime in and talk about what they use, because the welcome guide is really just a way for you to get your folks to know what's happening with the product, what the product's expected to do, that sort of thing. So just curious if you find those helpful or if you have any other tools you like to use to introduce people to the products you're implementing. And sorry, I'll be just a couple more seconds here to unmute everybody.
I actually am new to this welcome guide. I've not seen this, but maybe because I'm not on the receiving end of the welcome guide.
Oh, yeah, these are available on the community under each of the product hubs for each of the products. So when you go to, for instance, well, this isn't a great example. When you go to a product hub like hardware asset management and you navigate to get started, this is where you'll find the welcome guide. And these are really great because they just kind of introduce you to what's in the product, making you think about what business outcomes you want to think about, and how to chart your implementation success path, different things you can use, Partner Finder, etc. And then we talk about preparing for organizational change because we know a lot of people don't think about that when they're heading into this. And then we, have some resources here that you can bookmark. Although we need to update these because the Customer Success Center has kind of gone away and is moving over to a new platform that we'll be announcing at Knowledge.
Okay. Well, yeah. So from a client perspective, right? This is in a way new to me. I've been in the community, but I've not seen this. And one thing I think the account relationship people will have to be conveying this because I had an engagement where we implemented ham, right? And it was just that we got into it. Not nobody in my stakeholder community knew about this, especially when you talked about OCM, right?
Yeah, yeah.
For me, I've been in so many implementations that no one talks about that. They just
No.
buy the product hoping it would do what they're doing today instead of knowing what it can do for them to deliver the same outcome in a different way of doing it.
Yep, 100%. That happens all the time. And then nobody wants to spend time or money on OCM because they think it's a waste of time, but it's really like one of the most important things you can do.
Yes, yes. One thing to answer, Brady, your question about what do we use, right? You know, many customers don't have demand management. So in one of the implementations that I got involved with, I told them, you know, what we could use, you know, since we have the agile development module, use that for intake management,
Mhm.
right? And take it from there. The only challenge that I faced at that time is I could not create a visualization of that roadmap, right? You know, you create a
Mhm.
release record, you say you're going to deploy this product or feature within a certain period of time, but I don't have a way to produce a report and visualize that.
Right. Yeah.
Uh,
Any Prabhakar, you wanted to throw in a comment?
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah.
So we actually implemented internally the entire Ham Pro uh, just a month back. In fact, we went live. We, targeted. Earlier, we were not having Ham. This is the first time that we have implemented for our organization, and it was done successfully with our partner team, practice team that we have. And yeah, so we are in the process of the change management. It's quite hard, as you know, people have been using the traditional way of working. But yeah, we are trying to figure out different ways as part of the change management, trying to work with the business, work with the end users, making sure that the entire loop of or the life cycle of the ham start getting used the sooner.
Um, yeah. So any other tools that you like to use to when you're getting started?
Sorry, come again.
Are there any other tools anybody wants to mention that they use when they're getting started with an implementation? 'Cause if not, I can.
No, we are impact customers, so we got all the information handy from them, and they actually helped us in getting onboarded with the ham implementation when we started.
Okay, excellent. All right.
Hey, Prabhakar, uh, so your
Hi, Lenny.
organization really work with ServiceNow in the impact program, right? To measure those
Yeah.
initiatives. Yeah,
Yes.
that's the other thing, right? We purchase impact and then no one would like to spend time dealing with it.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. That's true. No, that happens. I think that's where I came in picture.
Yeah, and I think there's been some confusion about what impact actually is. I think that's starting to get a little more clear, but I think some people had different expectations for what impact would be as well, and then what they got were two different things. Um, But definitely, if you do have impact, if you purchase impact, do definitely do make it take advantage of that. Um, so another area that we often get a lot of questions about is how do I sequence my implementation? Because you feel kind of overwhelmed at the beginning. And I just wanted to make sure that you were all aware that we have these shoot, where did my link go? Here, I have it back here. So we have these on Now Create for most of the major products. I don't know if you can see that. I know it's kind of small. Um, but it goes through foundations. Maybe I made it too big now. And foundational things you need to do, the crawl stage, the walk stage, run, and then what they call fly. And these can be found on Now Create. So just curious if anybody's using these or was aware of those.
Do these exist for like custom scoped applications as well?
No, just for applications that we have in the platform.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if there was like I know like in our the application fundamentals class or the application fundamentals development class. I'm misnaming it, but hopefully it's understood. I know that one of the things that was presented was a way to go about doing like your business requirement intake, and there was a suggested template that you could use that was like gone over on the course. I wasn't sure if that like translated into something that might be available in something like this or other documentation that ServiceNow might offer.
I unfortunately am not familiar with what they were referring to, but I do have some content on the community
Mhm.
addresses that. So this is my project readiness checklist here. And this is a really good thing to go through to before you get started, to make sure that you've thought about everything. There's a lot of things on here that I think people just kind of skip over, like project charter, kickoff preparation, all that kind of good stuff.
Yeah,
Does
this
anybody?
should be great. What if I to have the link to this for sure.
Sure, I'll drop
Thank
that.
you.
in the chat. Is anybody familiar with or have a link to the checklist that's in the course by any chance? Right.
On which course?
He was just mentioning how there was one of the foundational courses, they talk about a checklist that you can use to get started.
Yeah,
No,
for
no.
application development. I'll have to see if I can find like what page it might be on for anybody that's taken it in the Inkling ebook. And then see if maybe anybody has an idea if there's like um a community post or something like that that has similar content, or maybe something that ServiceNow offers that's kind of expanding on what was offered as like a suggested template during the course. I know it's not helpful for me not to have something to show you guys, but I can see if I can find it while we're discussing over the webinar.
Okay, cool. Does anybody else have any tools or checklists that they like to use that they might want to share with the group, or any processes around this? I mean, don't be shy.
Somehow, somehow thinking of the strategic portfolio management.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just hanging. I'm hanging in there because we have a big. What my actual problem is to somehow sell the strategic portfolio management and then get into the agile team. I think it was called before. We have the agile development and the agile testing and stuff. That I'm a bit struggling to find a very good reason to tell that is the way to go with ServiceNow, instead of just working with too many interfaces like Microsoft 365 and stuff.
And smart
Um,
sheets.
I'm gonna comment on that one, Rita.
Yeah,
So
cool.
the key is really a strategic agreement, right? I call that strategic agreement because organizations will tend to be married to their specific tools, each group.
Yeah.
And that's where the direction will have to be set, saying, okay, from here on, this is how we're gonna operate, and here's the technology enabler we're going to use, such as SPM or the Agile Development 2.0, right?
Mm.
And then of course promote adherence. That's not going to be the easy part, promoting adherence, right? Because you will have to say, okay, constituent, this is what we have agreed. Of course, we're going to send out communication saying you need to adhere to this mechanism from here on. Otherwise, whatever requests you have may not be addressed, right? One suggestion that I could probably say is use a catalog item for that,
Mm.
right? And then, of course, behind it, write that catalog process to write into one of the tables of the Agile Development 2.0 or the demand management of SPM. That's
Yeah, and the bizarre thing is we already use some kind of the components there. We're talking about demand management that we use it until the cows come home, and we start with it, and even there's a tension in using innovation management, but that somehow it blocks with them. Where I'm like, yeah, well, I mean, it really, like you said, it depends. Do you want to use it strategically, or do you just want to use it as like, just an add-on because I'm application junkie?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Terry, did you want to chime in on this?
Yeah, something that we've struggled with as well is getting people away from, well, we have a problem where we have Microsoft project, and we have people doing their own type of development of project management tools a little bit. But one way we're starting to deal with this is I have buy-in from the project management office that we have, and they are putting a couple people onto looking at and evaluating all the components of SPM to identify how they do things now in SharePoint, and identify if there's any gaps, and that to show the value before we roll it out to everybody. So it's just something that you may want to consider if you have a champion, and you can have a couple people actually just take out of the box SPM and start playing with it to figure out exactly how it works and how it fits into your process to show the value. Because I think we are going to move to SPM completely for all our projects, but it is an uphill battle at times. So we're going to show how quickly we can deliver, and the automations that people right now are doing manually is going to be huge for us.
Terry, I'm kind of commenting on when you said that, right? So it and when your PMO said they're gonna look at that, I think in addition to what you just said, it comes down to what the organization is trying to, in a way, rationalize, right? From a business application perspective. And in this case, these intake capability or technology is a business capability. And that's why I keep on going back to, what's the strategy, right? The EAs should also contribute into that conversation so that
Yes.
the PMO can say, yep, definitively, this is what we're going to do. And you have SPM, you could take advantage of the capabilities of that, right? The APM, the technology process lifecycle, it's all there.
I see we got some comments in the chat here. Kamel is talking about doing demos to promote the visibility of it and get buy-in. And Prabhakar is presenting about doing a successful SPM implementation at K25. So he sounds like he'd be a good resource. And this is the link here that Casey put in the chat on managing application development. So if you were interested in that, that's what that is. Some other items that I have out here on the community. This is my requirements gathering guide. And unfortunately, I just basically have it for the basic applications for ITSM mostly. And I've been asked several times if I could expand this out, but I just haven't been able to get to it. But I think you can use this as sort of like a template for how you want to go about defining requirements for any of the products in the platform. Because it's like, what's your current process? What are your pain points? Who's got ownership? What does the ideal process look like? That sort of thing. But be interested to hear how other folks deal with requirements gathering. If you have any other tools you want to share with a team or processes that work for you.
In general, just to share in, I would say that your document is actually very good. I've utilized that as a template just to gather requirements, because there are some key aspects into this for what is the current state, what is your current process, and the ideal process, which very much tucked into that we need to have the idea in instead of just a requirement. So I think there are some key points to take away from this.
Yeah. Oh, I'm glad you found it useful.
Brenda, can you share this link, please?
Absolutely.
I basically have something similar. Just coming from, if anybody of you guys know the International Institute of Business Analysis, we have some kind of similar thing. Because lots of people they think that business analysis is the same like requirements engineering, though it's a part of it, but the template is pretty much the same, which is interesting. It looks into the processes. Same goes with even the RACI metrics we put in. We have it handling a lot of in the process environment, and the same thing goes into define values within this requirements gathering, as well as next steps. And sometimes we even include like an MVE as well, like a minimum viable ecosystem to scale on the value, so to say.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I mean, it's not rocket science, but I think it's just getting it all into one place and making it easier for people to consume it. Probably the main thing about these checklists.
I actually got it configured, the simplified version of the same view or the same parameters what we have in the demand flow, because we have we have formed a demand review board, which actually goes through all the requirements. So of course, this is not so, I mean, my form is not so exhaustive, but yeah, the simplified version is what we are using it. We got it configured into the system directly.
Okay, cool.
And Prabhakar, did you expose that in the portal?
Yes.
Okay.
Any other thoughts on requirements gathering templates or anything of that sort that anybody wants to chime in about? What's helpful for you? What challenges you might have trying, even when you do have the templates that you want to talk about? This is our opportunity to share battle stories and tips and tricks and what's for you.
I think the key element in collecting requirements is having a good conversation with the stakeholder. One thing that I have done, at least personally, is that somebody will send in a requirement, right? Two sentence requirement. Of course, it's our duty to explore that and create a way to define what is the outcome that you're trying to achieve if we do this for you, right? And what action are you going to do that you hope to achieve an outcome from? It's almost like a fundamental Scrum story, right?
Yes.
Mhm.
Then from there, we design the technical elements.
Right. Yeah, you have to, I think one of the keys to requirements gathering is to not let people get into solutioning right away. You have to be like, okay, this is the requirement, how are we going to achieve that? Or what's the goal? But sometimes people get into, oh, well, we'll create a table with this form on it and blah, blah, blah. And you're just like, wait, time out. You're getting way ahead of yourself. So I think that's a really important thing to note. Casey made a really great comment here in the chat about using Copilot to synthesize some of his things together. I know you're the introverted at heart, Casey, but do you want to come off mute and talk about that at all?
Sure. Yeah, it's just like a lot of the content on Now Create or out in the world is for a large enterprise, right? That might have all these teams and governance committees and things like that. And not every organization has it. So rather than try to convert it all, I'd like to take a lot of that content and effectively build an agent that I can say, help me refine the starting steps and OCM changes for this enhancement request to create 7 new catalogs. And it just helps me ideate, but like force it to use the ServiceNow framework. But then I use our company titles and our structure and stuff. And it speeds it up. It's not something I like to use wholesale, but it does provide good results if you give it the data and don't like just go on ChatGPT and say, make me OCM plan for this or something, you're going to get a lot of garbage that way.
No kidding. Yeah. Is anybody else using any AI tools to help with this? Just curious.
Well, Chat GPT, of course. Actually, they do a good job there as well. Sometimes I'm honest with you. Sometimes I'm putting in the prompt just to get a certain outcome to a structure in a document, even that is being requirement or asking um, for some. If we need to have a diagram, for example, to show relations, I'm asking for the same because I think most of them they're using Mermaid for visualizing stuff, and they do a pretty good job once you put the right prompts in.
Oh, yeah. And Travelcar is also using Copilot, so that's cool. All right, awesome. All right, so we talked a little bit about the sequencing of implementations, and also there's one other, there's a couple, oh shoot, yeah, this is the one somebody sent the link and said it's blank, and it sure enough is, isn't it? There's also these process guides you can use when you're starting to gather requirements and you're doing your workshops. I don't know if any of you on here are involved with doing the workshops, but these are some things that can help you guide folks as you're going through those workshops. And I don't know if I can download that so it's a little bigger, I guess.
Actually, Britta, that's one of my favorite artifact, right? The process guides, because that I think helps in the conversation with the stakeholders who are, let's just say, who wants to go into process mining, right? And like I try to always advocate, look at this process guide first, and understand the outcome this is going to give you before we even go into, like what you said, the solutioning part where we end up customizing, right? I always say, ServiceNow is a Lamborghini. Okay.
Yeah.
If you do not know how to drive a Lamborghini, don't customize the Lamborghini yet.
I like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that is so true. Yeah, that's a really good point. I like that. I'm going to steal that one, Randy. Anybody else have any ways that they things about requirements gathering workshops you want to share? I see Gareth uses them, and Brad's pointed out that there's a repository of ServiceNow AI prompts. So that's cool.
No, but I'm specifically interested in process mining. I never saw it in action, honestly. I have to admit, though, that I once was using Celonis, and that really gave me the creeps when seeing what is possible with that. But it doesn't have to be in this session to tell about the experience of process mining.
Yeah.
What I found very interesting in Celonis, it's not just only about process. It tells you even what consequences you have if you have a deviation or variable in your process, like monetary things, or to have a real big root cause analysis with that. So I'm not sure how process mining in ServiceNow handles that.
Yeah, so if you're interested in process mining, Dan Grady is the outbound product PM for that, and he does a lot of academies and a lot of webinars. And yeah, they're really good, content. It's not just, all the marketing hype about it. He actually, talks about how to use the capabilities in the process, how it works, and how it's embedded for parts of the applications or all the applications. So yeah, I can send you some links on that after the webinar here.
Great. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, because yeah, he's really good. He's very, very on the case with his. But we do have these for most of the applications on the platform. So if you look for implementation guide on Now Create, you can find these. And then we also have the process guides. So I just happened to pull up the process mining one, but here's like discovery and some out here. Yeah. All right. So I wanted to talk about the tools that we use for gathering. We talked about the workshops and some of these templates that are available for you. And then we talked about the process guides. Does anybody want to talk about sort of like any objections or challenges that you have while doing requirements gathering that could be helpful learnings for other folks on the call?
Yeah, I can start.
Yeah.
The biggest challenge that at least I come across is that the business already comes with a mindset that, and they actually get into the technical solutions.
Yes.
Some of them may not be even a kind of an eligible candidate for service now, with regard to from its maintainability, long term solution, and so on. But the business, they are already come with a mindset that yeah, it has to be implemented on service now, even though it's like a glorified excel per se, right? So that point of time, it becomes extremely difficult to go back and then have a conversation, have a kind of a mutual understanding that hey, you don't worry, what you want is what you tell to us, and then we will somehow, the tech part you leave it to us, we will
Yeah.
make it happen the way that you want it to be, the way the workflows, the process flows. We will make it happen. You don't get into the technical part. Of course, we will explain to you what is the backend technology that we are using, and so on and so forth.
Mhm.
This is one of the biggest concern, or the day-to-day work that I have to do, go back, convince them, negotiate with them. Maybe
Yep.
others can chime in.
Yeah, go ahead, Brian.
Thanks. So I've got a slightly inverted example that we've run into several times, particularly with modernizing out of a legacy system where the subject matter experts or the process or product owners are not familiar with ServiceNow, and they've struggled to engage on requirements gathering because they feel that they don't understand what ServiceNow does. And referencing back to the process guides that you showed a few minutes ago, we found those are really helpful for helping a customer who's not familiar with the platform or the product at least have something that they can bounce their current process against to then identify where are the deltas between how they do things today, how they want to do things, and how it's described in those process guides.
Yeah, I think you touch on a really good point, because there's always that fine line of, getting them to give you the requirement, but then they feel like they need to understand the technology to a certain extent before they make their requirement demand. And so there's always this fine line, because then once they get too much into the technology, they might start trying to, like was mentioned earlier, try to solution for you.
I think just to contribute further, right? I think that last statement is a key part of a process when we're onboarding a technology capability within ServiceNow. Kind of as part of OCM, I think, review this process guide, for example, and maybe do a basic demonstration of what that product will do in relation to the process guide, so that our consumers, right, will understand how the product works out of the box and say, okay, this will do. Or, most of the stuff that we have out of the box are not automated, right? Maybe that's the only thing that we may need to do. Add some automation through the workflow. I don't know, just contributing.
Yeah, no, perfect. Yeah, because like I said, there's always that chicken and the egg conversation when you first sit down with a new customer and you're trying to get requirements. They want to know how it works, but you want the requirements.
Yeah, you gotta talk a dog out of the meat wagon. That is, I think. We too. We had this with IT ITOM today, just to really to see the benefits, to get them understand what the benefits are. Just instead of manually just maintaining all the CI information to say, well, boys, go so I'm just if we talk about service mapping and want to be up to date, then you just should consider a bit more visibility in ITOM than just only discovering.
One thing to get business and people on board, I found it's really hard to get people to visualize what can be done in ServiceNow, even if you can show it to them.
Mhm.
With projects, I've recommended that to the businesses, don't spend your time trying to make it perfect up front. Try to go out of box as much as possible, play with the tool. And then once you understand how it works and what you actually need to change, then let's look at what needs to change, because I've seen projects spin and spin and spin on the smallest details because they're trying to make it either similar to what their legacy system was, or they're trying to make it to fit everybody. And they're people you're good they're going to change their process after they start using the tool, no matter how they design it. It's just, that is the fact. It's just going to happen. So if you faster you can get them something out of the box to use, uh, the happier they'll be, because they'll totally understand what can be done, or what they see and what they actually need to change. It's crazy, but I've seen this happen a few times, and we've started to do it this way, and we're seeing much better success, and our business is much happier because they're getting a product a lot faster.
Mhm.
And honestly, ServiceNow is built for that, to be able to roll out something like super quick for them to test.
Mhm.
So take advantage of it.
Yep. That is really great advice. I think so many people get so involved and we're going to get everything perfect before we roll it out.
Mhm.
And
It's
you're
never
never,
perfect.
no, it's never going to be perfect. And like you said, then once you roll it out, they're going to want to change it.
Yep.
And Terry, that's a good contribution, because many of us think project, right?
Hmm.
We don't think product.
Yeah,
And your
right.
example really is product management,
Hmm.
iteratively improve upon it as we see what it can do for us.
Yep. And it still can be done under the project, all that work. It's just you're giving them like a beta product to try out themselves for a bit, until you're like, okay, can we do this in production? And even when they go in production, once if it's a public facing website or something, or expand out to other users, you're still going to change it because you're going to get more feedback.
Yeah.
But if you can get it to a point where the business is happy, then they understand when these people come in saying, I want to change this and change that, how that they actually understand now those changes, how it's going to affect their workflow, and that, and the product owner can say, yeah, no, we're not doing that, or hey, that's a great idea, let's change that. And then there's that understanding and ownership that's super important.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. There's been some good comments dropped in the chat too. Brad,
Yeah.
let great be the enemy of good. And Mark talking about living with the mantra of live with out of the box for 3 months and then coming back. I don't know, Mark, if you'd be interested in expanding on that a little bit. Don't mean to put you on the spot, but if you would like to, certainly feel free to speak up.
Yeah, we've tried to keep out of box. I mean, extending things here and
Mhm.
there, no big deal. But if they're a lot of times, so we also use any new module spoke as a way of examining and realigning processes, because ServiceNow has millions of customers and usually has a very good process. They've thought it through, big and small. So what we've done is we've said, this is the process that ServiceNow is designed. How is it different from ours? How can we adjust to what is in ServiceNow? And then what doesn't work for us, and what do we need to extend or change? And because of that, we've been able to stay mostly out of box and
Beautiful.
sometimes unwind some of our technical debt from 7 years ago.
Wow.
And then another note I was going to put for app development and even service catalog forms, a lot of times customers will come to us and say, we need you to build this form, and these are the 20 fields that the customer has to fill out.
Yep.
The user has to fill out in order to submit this, because we can't do our work until we have all this information. And a lot of times we will create a service catalog item with way fewer fields than they need, just as a version 1, and then we just take their iterative, this will be version 1, we'll regroup in 30 days and see what tickets you've had submitted, requests you've had submitted with your form. Sometimes we get requests, put these 20 things in there, and years ago we used to put those, and then there would be no submissions because the customer, the user didn't have the information in order to submit the form. So a lot of times somebody wants to build a Ferrari, and that solves their world, but a lot of times you just need a go-kart to get you started and then force a meeting for a service catalog type item. Same with an application. They want to collect a zillion fields, but they really only need 20. So
100%. Yep.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I think the key to that, though, is you probably really need good executive support to help keep pushing back on the different groups to be able to hold the line there.
Yeah.
All right. Any other thoughts anybody wants to share about what works or doesn't work for requirements gathering and how you've made it work? What about who's involved with it? Sometimes I find that not always the right people are involved. And sometimes that can skew what kind of requirements you come out with. All right. Yeah. Sorry to see you go, Gareth. See you next month. All right. All right. Well, let's talk a little bit about some other things that you might need to get requirements for, like data and integrations. And I think this area is oftentimes kind of overlooked or underrated because people forget that they have to talk to other parts of IT and try to get credentials or permissions to access certain things in the, that they need to integrate with them. So I didn't know if we wanted to, anybody was interested in having a conversation about that.
I mean, for like data wise, I mean, this is something that I think becomes like a big part of our day-to-day, or even just process intake, where we have to kind of try to find out all the data that we need up top. Sometimes we don't know, and that becomes kind of a challenge. So like I would love for ideas on how to think about asking the right questions at project intake or process intake. We have quite a few teams that we interact with that house a lot of different data that we have to ingest. Sometimes new data, or we need to modify the way that we've been previously importing data to facilitate a new process being built within ServiceNow. So I'm curious how others have maybe built into their process ways of delegating that business requirement gathering or technical requirement gathering. Because I often find that if I'm like the platform owner, I often am doing multiple things. I'm sometimes developing, but I'm also scheduling meetings with various individuals across our organization. And there can become points where we start development and we realize that there was a huge critical data component that we didn't even think about. And now there's resource constraints that we have to like kind of realize, and making sure that we're getting time at the appropriate resources. So I was wondering, maybe to kind of start a conversation, if anybody has ideas on how to really think about like expanding our data interrogation process, like figuring out where and who we need to be focused on.
It's a great question. Oh, okay, Scott's saying start with reporting. I also think, I had a project once where we were trying to get discovery going, and we spun our wheels for almost a year because the project manager couldn't get credentials for us to do it. And I think a lot of it was because the people who were being asked for the information just didn't really understand what we were doing, and what the platform was. And then of course we didn't have executive level support to hammer it out of them, so to speak. But I'd be curious if that other people have encountered these kinds of things. Well,
I don't have,
oh, go ahead.
yeah, I don't have an easy button on the data sharing and identifying where data is, but I will second that credentials and interconnections often become the long pole in the tent, and they're the thing that people think about the least. Just getting the two systems to talk to one another. I'll admit I've gotten many times caught in that kind of circular discussion with a data provider where I want to consume via API, and I ask, what data do you have? And they say, well, what data do you want? And we really do try to get those, systems that we're consuming from to at least give us a data dictionary, something like that. So at least we know what's available. But again, just in terms of the things that have slowed us down the most, actually turns out to be just getting the two systems to connect to one another, get the information sharing agreements in place and the interconnections themselves.
What's up, Brian? If I may interject on that, right? When the other side asks us what data do we need, because I've been in a project like that, it told me that they didn't have an API ready, and they still have to build it based on what we ask them. So
Yeah, it can get really tricky.
Are there like roles within some of your organizations that you have somebody designated to be asking like these like more specific technical questions and preparing work like diagrams that sort of articulate how the different systems interconnect? Because I think that's really where our biggest constraint might be, is like someone like me who's been with my company for like about 8 years. I have a lot of business knowledge, but I can't be I can't be every role, or I'm going to be unsuccessful at all of the roles that I'm doing. And so there comes to be a point where I might be a bottleneck, where I know the questions to ask, but others may not. And so I have to pause. So I'm wondering if other people have had success with like maybe technical analyst roles, and how maybe they've structured those roles to be able to ask these like data related questions, for instance, and what anyone's thoughts might be on that.
So just like you, Brad, I've been in that function where I know the functional aspect of it, right? But I don't know much on the technical side. And I always leverage what I would call my partner, who is the technical lead in my, platform. The guy that I think who's really familiar with the technicalities of the platform, although I have some. I always take him or her with me in conversations so that that person has an idea on what's being asked and take it from there, right?
And Kimmel makes a good point about relationships. I mean, so often in organizations, it does get down to the networking, the relationship. And so the suggestion is to, you know, cultivate that relationship with that group, and it helped their ITOM implementation, for instance. And I don't know, Kimmel, if you want to expand more on that, you certainly can. But that's a good point. So hopefully that gives you some good ideas. Yeah. All right. We are starting to, we got about 7 minutes left here. So if there's anything else anybody wants to bring up before we close out, we did not get through this whole presentation. So I want to know if you want to next month talk about best practices for continuous improvement and measuring value, or if you have another, if there's other topics that you'd rather talk about next month. So but okay, we still have some stuff coming in the chat over the last question. Okay, Prabhakar, are you talking about for next month, AI and Gen AI use cases? Okay, yes, best practices, okay. Yeah, continuous improvement is always a thing, no doubt. ROI value, yes, okay, best practices. Is there, around best practices, is this mostly around platform governance and maintenance and that sort of thing, or are you looking for something more specific by products? Okay. Platform governance, yeah, platform, okay. So maybe next month what I could do is see if I could get someone from our AI team to do a demo on the AI, and then we could also talk about platform governance. Although I know there will be a lot of stuff about AI at Knowledge, but of course I understand not all of you will be going either, so don't want you to miss out. But it does look like best practices is the winner chicken dinner here today.
I have a request, Brita, right?
Yeah.
So in the old days, during the COVID season, right, we did the virtual Knowledge, but maybe for the benefit of us who are not going, there might be a way to share some content there.
Yeah, I'm not sure what their plans are this year as far as sharing content from Knowledge. If there's going to be a virtual, you know, or if what sessions will be available online. You know, every year it's kind of like it's a new journey. So as soon as I know something about that, I can tell you. And then I also run an Ask the Experts series on Tuesdays. And back in January, we did talk about how to securely and compliantly set up AI. So here's the link to that recording. And that was one of our community MVPs who talked about that. And then we also had one of our product managers there, Kirill Suskinov, talk about the workflow data fabric. So if you're interested in that, or that's been floating around, you can get a little information on there. Yes, you can use personal email to attend the Ask the Experts. Those are open to anybody. And generally what those are topics around the platform. But a couple of weeks ago, actually, we did run one on imposter syndrome, which was incredibly popular. But we've also done some on security tools that you have in the platform that you might not be aware of, how to get your service catalog going, Employee Center. We've also done a couple on CSDM, which have been very popular. Yes, imposter syndrome. We did a Ask the Experts about that, and I'll drop the link in for that as well. And we had a really interesting discussion because we had a lot of people talking about it and how they'd experienced it and how they dealt with it. So that was pretty awesome. We've also done some on how to work with partners or expert services, or if you're planning to do it by yourself. Yeah, Kristen. Yeah, it was a big topic, and we had I think in my historically I've thought of it as something more that is applied to women, but imposter syndrome definitely affects everybody, and so we had a really good conversation about that. So I would encourage you to watch that recording if you are at all interested in that topic. And next week we'll be talking about ITOM. We did have one on ATF and reporting basics. Actually, let me just drop my whole playlist link in here for you. And you can, and if you have any questions about registering for those, let me know and I can help you get hooked up. And then, yeah, did everybody see Casey's comment there about working with AI? He's got a suggestion there with ChatGPT. And okay, platform governance includes continuous improvement. Okay, all right, cool. All right. All right, we are at 1 minute before closing out here. Any other things anybody wants to just make a quick comment on before we close out? I've really enjoyed the back and forth and the suggestions and the comments from everybody. And we'll look forward to seeing you all again next month, and then hopefully see a lot of you at Knowledge. So I hope you all have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you next month.